Hey guys, we're back. It's me, Alexis,
And Ollie.
and today we're here to talk about extinction, which is a really cool topic, can be a little bit controversial at times, but it's a fun one. I wanted to ask if you could bring back any species, what would it be?
Um, because like I'm not like those people who want to bring back like the woolly mammoth or the saber-toothed tiger. I Oh my God, there's an extinct species. I don't think it's a marsupial, but it's a rodent, and I'm blanking on the name right now. They're like a opossum, but they're like a descendant of him. They're cute. That's
Oh,
why I say that.
that sounds so cute. I'll have to look that up and we'll find out the name for
I'll insert it somewhere.
yeah, yeah, for our dear good listeners who are very patient and kind with us, we love you. Like I said, today we're gonna hop into extinction and de-extinction and any controversies behind it, because it's a big topic and it can get a little messy at times. Um, so extinction, we all probably think of dinosaurs, being extinct. That was the last mass extinction. That was the fifth mass extinction that happened. And while doing my research, I had seen that some scientists are saying that we may be on the brink of a sixth one, with so much human activity going on.
I know, like you've already mentioned it in multiple episodes, like the Anthropocene and just like how
Hmm.
much like human, I called it like a specific word. It was like super specific name that they like started naming this new geological epoch. But yeah, I saw that too and I was like, whoa. A lot of people will probably hear that and be like, yes, let's go. But I don't know about that.
No.
I know like when you are trying to decide what the main influential factor of like this new, I guess, projected mass extinction probably be habitat loss. And I think that's why it's becoming more and more like eye-opening of like how close we could be to a next one because of how much wildlife biodiversity is just gone. And I think there's like between the 1970s and 2021, it was like 73% of wildlife biodiversity is now gone. And so that's a big jump.
Yeah, that's a huge jump in a small amount of time. I mean, it's taken millions of years for any extant, which extant means currently living, extinct means not living anymore. Any current extant species, it took them millions of years to get to this point and to evolve to this point. And the fact that we as humans are able to have that power to like take them down so quickly is insanity to me. It's like in my soils class the other day, we were learning a statistic that an inch of soil can take 1,000 years to form. That is generations upon generations of people that will never see that inch of soil, but it can take 1 second to degrade. You can just, pour a chemical on it, you can step on it, you can drill into it, it can become waterlogged for no agricultural use anymore. And it's the same thing for any type of biodiversity. It may have taken millions of years for these animals and these plants to get to this point, and we can destroy it just like that in a matter of a few years compared to millions.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around that like statistic of a little inch of soil. I mean, soil is so important. And we have, I
Definitely.
think there was a previous recent episode that we had about like mycorrhizae and like how networks underground are so important for just everything above ground. But to think of like it goes down to the nitty-gritty of just our dirt. Like your dirt is that's why I hate digging holes now. I used to as a kid. I enjoyed like getting my hands dirty, but now I'm like, am I gonna disrupt anything if I were to like dig right here or like go underneath the soil? I don't know. It's all my chemical brain mixed with my like conservationist brain has made me so paranoid now, and it's not healthy.
Yeah, me too. And every time it rains, there's so many snails in my driveway, and I'm always picking them up and looking inside. I'm like, what is it doing in there? I
Hello.
just want to like, yeah, I'm like, hello, hi. Because sometimes I'll find empty ones and then I want to like take them inside and like collect them. So I've got like three just in my room, but I haven't found an empty one in a long time. But I'm like, should I even be picking these up? Like, am I disturbing them? Or like, did they take literally two whole days to get to this spot and I just picked it up and moved it or something? Anyway.
You may have a snail army come at you later.
Yeah, low key, I might. Anyway, which is totally valid because of the impact that humans have been having on biodiversity and organisms. Like we said, any recent extinction is definitely attributed to human impact with habitat loss, with overconsumption, and just overdoing it in literally every aspect, overfishing, logging, deforestation. Any industry has just totally overstepped. And I feel like we've lost a little bit of our conservation and preservation mindsets, as we kind of have discussed already in an episode um, about conservation and how crucial that is to keep that balance between humans and wildlife.
Exactly. And even not like disregarding if we weren't even here, say we're not in Anthropocene, there's still, well, actually, I feel like this would have to have happened if humans were on Earth. So I guess taken extent of like scientists, but like not how many people are on Earth. But there was a statistic that Hurt et al., Hurt Hirt, found that in a study they said that abiotic factors like climate temps and precipitation also indirectly impact extinction because of their influence on primary producers. And as we know from the trophic triangle, that primary producers are down at the bottom, which are very important for everything at the top. So that was one thing that I was like, oh, well, I mean, we've always known that as the rain gets less and less, there's droughts, and that can influence wildfires, which we just, saw in the news not too long ago. Very, very upsetting. But it's stuff like that that can show how climate change is impacting weather patterns, which ultimately impacts species and their survival. And then again, these abiotic factors are kind of limited to geographic region or even taxonomic groups, but it's still important to figure out how they play a part in the preservation of our species because we have I think one of our like really recent episodes we talked about conservation within like zoos and aquariums and that influences on endangered species and if anybody needs to know like if you want to think of something you can do in present day with extant species still then it's focus on those endangered species because while we're going to get into de-extinction later which can tie into how current day extinction is ethically challenging and bringing back older species that were once endangered species. This is one of those times where it's like, okay, but the habitats that have changed and are now like surviving in the way that they're going to for years to come are reliant on the endangered species that we have in current day, which is why it's important to keep legislature like the EPA and um, you know, all the wildlife and natural protection acts alive because they're going to help preserve the species to in turn combat climate change because we are kind of dominating of everything and in order for there to be a barrier between us and the snails that you pick up there's got to be something there to like show that these species are protected from to some extent.
For sure. Legislation would be a great way to protect our extant species and to protect endangered species. I was doing some research trying to find like the most recent extinction, which not speaking like mass extinction. Like I said, the dinosaurs were 65 million years ago. That doesn't sound very recent to us now, does it? So I was looking, and in the early 1900s, the passenger pigeon went extinct. It was it was a type of pigeon, and people were hunting it for their feathers and also to eat. And there was also a lot of habitat loss for them. So because of the combination of habitat loss and commercial hunting, their population just, I mean, it just shot down and eventually it became extinct, I believe, around 1914. So that just goes to show how if we just okay, let's just do whatever we want to. And I like these feathers. I like to eat this and not look at any alternatives and just keep going and keep gunning for that species. It is going to go extinct whether we like it or not, or whether we realize it or not. It's going to go extinct. It's not going to last forever, if we don't make an active uh effort to protect it.
Exactly, because extinction crises are identified to be centered around two adapted systems, which is human culture and ecosystem function. So the fact that, like you were just talking about, the passenger pigeon, like we relied on them for meat and poultry and things like that. So like we had some specific overexploitation derivative that caused them to in turn like their populations to decline, but also thinking into like what our current environment is since they've been gone. Like their primary food source was the American chestnut, which is now functionally extinct. So like we've already altered things even just since 1914, much less since we just first, came to the Americas. But that's kind of why we were talking about like the Anthropocene at the very beginning. So like humanity or human enterprise, that's the word. So that's why we were dubbed the word Anthropocene. And because we have impacted our geographics so much, or the processes in turn, we've left what we call technofossils, which is just like human made objects like left behind, which we've mentioned in our actual like previous episode, which is like digital strands. Um, there's like plastics, metals, radioactive waste, some more. So we've basically just like we're starting to see the Wall-E, you know, derivatives. Like
Yeah.
this is what they did to get where the little robot had to clean up after, and it's just like why don't people realize that? Like, why do they not see that our projections were here before we even started like degrading our environment the way that we have?
Absolutely. And I think that's really interesting. Technofossils, that's such an interesting way to put that. And, as our technology goes extinct, as we keep developing technology, we talk about that all the time. That'll be really interesting to see develop in the future, or if people find something that they, 100 years from now, if they find something from 2000, they may have no idea what it is, which I think is fascinating. But let's hop into a little bit of de-extinction. We've been on the topic of extinction. Let's hop into de-extinction. De-extinction is basically taking a extinct species, if you can access it, an extinct species genes or any type of relative of them, and bringing it back through means of cloning, genetic engineering, things like that. So that can be a little bit of a problem ethically, just depending on, what are the circumstances here? What is the quality of life of this thing going to be? Is it going to be mutated because we have engineered its genes, its DNA? There's a lot of different complications that can happen with trying to bring back an extinct species. And like you had mentioned earlier, with the passenger pigeon, it would we could bring it back potentially. I guess like I don't know if we actually could, but hypothetically, if we were to bring it back, it wouldn't really be super viable because the American chestnut is not here with it, and the habitat that it used to live in is so drastically different. It has been changed so drastically that would it even be worth it to have that back? Would it even be beneficial to current ecosystems? And that's another aspect as well. Is this animal going to be potentially harmful or a threat to current species? Are we going to put current species in danger? Is it going to be dangerous to us? We have no idea until we try it. So I mean, it's a very new idea. When I was doing my research on this, the kind of first de-extinction that I was able to find, which we've done cloning and things before, but in terms of an extinct animal, was with the Pyrenean ibex, which is a type of goat. And this was in 2003. They took the similar methods that they use for Dolly the sheep, which was kind of the first example of a clone. If you weren't aware of that, it's pretty cool. Look it up if you don't know. But they were able to clone this goat, and they impregnated many, like 50 goats or something, to see like which one would actually take. And seven of them ended up pregnant. And I'm not sure how many actually gave birth. I'm assuming just one because that's what it sounded like from the report I was reading. But This goat was born and it survived for only a few minutes before it died due to respiratory issues. So it was a remarkable discovery in terms of de-extinction and of cloning and how we can use technology to bring things back. But at the same time, it died only after a few minutes of surviving. So it's like, okay, is this even humane, or how can we improve the system to where as soon as a extinct species is born again through de-extinction processes, how can we have better support for them and make sure that they stay alive? And how are we going to continue to support them long term? Are all good questions that we need to ask as we learn more about this really new process.
I know, and because you did the research, so correct me if I'm wrong when I say this, but I don't really know how expensive that project was. And
Yeah.
a lot of like de-extinction processes, cost millions of dollars to do. Which I think this quote that I found from, I don't remember his credibility, but I'm pretty sure he was an environmentalist of some extent. But his name is Paul Ehrlich, and he said, spending millions trying to de-extinct a few species will not compensate for thousands of species lost to human activity. And I thought that was the most like powerful like quote that I could possibly think of de-extinction, because like you were mentioning, like scientists and conservationists have argued, I'm sure, over the, many years that we've since Dolly the sheep, of like how we could implement those genetic modifications to bring back extinct species that we once, were thought to have roamed the earth, and we were like, oh, let's see them. Like when I was talking about the woolly mammoth and saber-tooth tiger, those are two that I hear all the time when people are like, oh, is a mammoth ever going to come back? But we have to realize that like we can't just recreate the past without understanding the complications of the present, because when we're talking about extinctions that are happening in current time, those are the species that would be more parietal when it comes to should we reintroduce them to the wild, because the habitat might not be as drastically different as it was from when even the passenger pigeon roamed. So it I think that's when the ethics really come into it, of like, what is our priority? What do we need to look into if we were to spend all this money that the science community doesn't have anymore to look into projects like that? Because in the face of like restoring and conserving biodiversity, like genetic modifications and even like other biotechnologies are just, it's not completely solved yet, like how it works and how to implement it, and it needs more governance, I think, to really understand how it can go into like the political field and like trying to devolve the ethics behind it.
That's an excellent point. And with the cost, I didn't actually find the actual cost. I didn't read that in the report. I'm sure it was there somewhere. But I didn't see that. I would be really interested to know, though, in 2003, 22 years ago, how expensive that was. And especially looking at, any de-extinction efforts now and see what that would look like and how expensive that would be now. I think that'd be super cool. But you're so right. As technology evolves and as we are figuring out biotechnology and just more ideas of de-extinction, we have to be really, really careful on that fine line of, okay, what is ethical here? What is not? How worth it is this? Like, are we going to put millions of dollars into this? Do we have millions of dollars to put into this? So it's kind of just picking your battles. And I definitely agree that we should be focusing on more recent endangered species, which brings me to I found out that I believe it's the San Diego Zoo has a quote frozen zoo, and they basically just keep genetic material and anything related, any information related to genetics about animals in this frozen zoo laboratory. I didn't look insanely deep into this, but it sounds really cool and could be super important, I believe, for conservation efforts in the future, uh, which is so insane. But they do have genetic material of an extinct bird. I don't know how to pronounce it. Paori, I think is how you pronounce it. I don't know, but it's an extinct bird, and they have the genetic material of this bird. I am not sure to the extent of if they've done anything with it or not, or if they have just had it on hand and are just waiting for maybe to experiment with it, or just having it just to have it and say, hey, we have the technology that we can preserve this. And I think that's cool too, without getting into the dirty nitty gritty of the ethics of it. They can still say, hey, we were able to preserve the genome, and that kind of keeps the species alive almost. I think it's kind of endearing when you think about something that's no longer here. I've heard like there's a saying that's you die twice. The first time is when your physical body, like when you leave, and then the second time is the last time that somebody says your name. So I think that it's really cool that we can still talk about these extinct species and that we can have their genetic material to study more about them and maybe know more about the species that we weren't able to know before. As technology continues to get better, we can use this over time and see, okay, well, maybe in 2005 we only knew this, but now in 2025 we have this type of computer and we can look at this again. We can keep revisiting this and learn more. So I think that is super cool.
Yeah, I think I know exactly what you're talking about at the Frozen Zoo because I don't want to say false information, so I'm definitely gonna like put something around the screen if this is. But I'm pretty sure that's kind of like the situation in which they were freezing embryos from like southern and northern white rhinos to be able to help bring them back if that were obtainable. And that's a good example of like a more like recent species that like actually would be very beneficial rather than harmful. Because another thing when we're talking about like the ethics is like what we have to determine the question of importance between reintroducing surviving endangered species versus attempted de-extinctions and like which one is really relative to future science and what you're talking about like revisiting because we all technology is always going to advance from here, so we'll always have the opportunity to look back at 5 years in time and say wow, we know so much more than we once did. But it's what we choose to do with the knowledge that we gain as far as like how that's going to impact future generations and what they know of today and present day. And why I have always been very weary myself of the idea of de-extinction. And like we had talked about it very briefly in my SciComm class, in regards to like what could we as environmentalists do to communicate to the public, like why they're being falsely advertised the idea of de-extinction through like Avatar, through Jurassic Park is a
Mm.
huge one.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
so like how that could be harmful in an aspect of like how important it is for past species to be reintroduced. Because I mean, thankfully, every movie has to have a protagonist and an antagonist. So in Jurassic Park, it didn't seem like they were giving it the like hero complex when it came to like bringing back these like super genetically modified dinosaurs. And in fact, every single time that happened, spoiler if you haven't watched the series, but it ended up with them like killing a lot of things and people getting harmed in the process. So I'm thankful that it wasn't like, oh my God, sunshine and rainbows, let's do this for, past species. But at the same time, it does still make people who have no knowledge on this subject at all think, that is so possible, let's do it.
Jurassic Park is a perfect example, and I'm so glad that they were able to portray it in a way that doesn't make us want to pull our hair out as environmentalists,
I
because that
know.
happens a lot. And going back to things that we probably don't want to bring back, the woolly mammoth is something that people talk about a lot because that was such a long time ago, and it was such a big animal. I mean, I think it looks cool. It's cool to study, but would I want one roaming around the earth now? Maybe not. So I was able to find this website while I was doing my research. It's called colossal.com. It was like literally when I looked up de-extinction, it was one of the first few results. And so I click on it and it's got this really cool looking interface and I'm like, okay, so I keep scrolling down and I mean even just the first page of it, it's basically it almost seems like a portfolio of everything that they put together about de-extinction and they kind of give like the Wikipedia definition of de-extinction versus how they define it at Colossal. Again, I didn't look super deep into this, but it seemed really cool. And they have I believe they have efforts for looking at the woolly mammoth genome and just seeing what it would be like for that to become extant instead of extinct, um, which is really, really cool. I want to look more into this website. We'll link it down below for you guys because it looks like it's got a plethora of information. But yeah, they're a laboratory company. It's just Colossal Laboratories and Biosciences. But it's just colossal.com. Check it out if you're curious about de-extinction and about woolly mammoths specifically, because I know that they mentioned that too.
Yeah, I know whenever I see pictures of like people's illustrations of what a woolly mammoth look like, I mean, it's cool and interesting to see how elephants once or elephant predecessors used to have fur versus like their
Yeah.
hard-plated skin that they have now. But it's also like that's super freaking scary. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know if I'd personally want to go to a conservation program to look at one because I think I would probably run away and cry.
It would be pretty insane. And not to get doom and gloom here, but with climate change and with melting glaciers and temperatures only rising, that would be another example of like, okay, where's this thing gonna live? Because
Right.
if you plop a woolly mammoth right here in Georgia, it is going to be, I'm going to find it in my backyard shaving its fur coat with my razor because it's not going to be happy. It is not going to be happy at all in any type of warm, humid environment. I can tell you that right now.
I know if the largest mammal in like the Arctics, the polar bear, is already going through a mass, like, not extinction, but they're dying at very, very, very fast rates, then what would this probably the largest mammal on Earth like go through just to be reintroduced to the wild? Because like you said, it's a never ending, well, hopefully not never ending. I'm not going to say that because we're going to reverse this at some point. Like
We're going to
the,
do it. We're going to do it, guys. We are going to do it.
and if you don't, then if we don't, then ignore this episode of this podcast. But considering like it feels like this never ending warming of the climate, like there are so many species that we have seen have existed in the past that have existed in a prehistoric habitat before we were here. So what makes it feel like it's going to happen after we're here or after we're gone, even if, but like I don't know. That's one of those things that's like, is it really ethical to use technology to measure, how important it is to bring back certain species or to even just reintroduce species that we just want as like I think that it's more of like a pet mentality of like I just want to have one so I can see what it's like
Yeah. Yeah.
rather than like a I want this thing to be able to thrive and live in the habitat that it once did. Like I really don't think it has to do with that because if that were the case, if that were the mindset, we would be doing that to endangered species right now.
Hmm.
Just saying.
I absolutely agree. Extinct species are cool. Study them. Go home and watch Jurassic Park, but please be mindful of the ethical concerns.
I know. While the scale of extinction seems daunting, it is crucial to remember that we do have power to make a difference, going back to like feeling like it's all doom and gloom. So, just even supporting conservation efforts, advocating for sustainable practices. If you don't really know where to start with that, please go watch. We have a new Earthly Threads series on YouTube where we like are going to link most of our pertaining episodes to sustainability so you have somewhere to go, but also just making conscious choices in your daily lives because that can protect the species that we're talking about that are on the verge of going extinct or even the ones that have already gone extinct. So please keep pulling on the green thread and just know that your impact is going to mean the world to the world.